Many programmers seem to find that unthinkable. They say, if I don't do this, this, and this to get a programming job, I'll starve. They literally claim that they will starve. Now, even in India, there are millions of people who don't work as programmers and are not starving. So I think that they're exaggerating somewhat. Now, I had no other noteworthy skills, but I'm sure I could have been a waiter. Perhaps not at a fine restaurant, but I could have been a waiter somewhere. Now, there are two things to note about being a waiter. One is, being a waiter is not unethical, unless perhaps if you're at McDonald's. And second, as a waiter, you're not going to starve. Unless perhaps if it's at McDonald's. Please be aware that the popularity of McDonald's is due to a confusion on the part of poorly educated Americans. They heard the term fast food and they thought it meant rapid food. They didn't realize it meant food for not eating. But that's exactly what it's meant for. The idea is that if you are fasting, but you're getting hungry and you're feeling a pull to eat something, you imagine that McDonald's food and you lose your appetite. And that way you can complete your fast. So now, if anyone ever suggests to you that you should eat at McDonald's, you understand how to explain why that's a mistake. So, I had found an ethical way to cope with the situation I was in. And that makes a difference because you can justify doing things that are unethical to a certain point if it's the only way you can survive. You know, if it's not as bad as your death, then you can argue it's justified. But I couldn't make that argument because I had found another way I could survive, at least. So I couldn't say it's better for me to develop non-free software than to die. I could live anyway without developing non-free software. But I realized that for me, being a waiter would be no fun at all, and it would be a waste of my skill as an operating system developer. It's better to waste a skill than to misuse it. So this was a step up. Developing non-free software would be misuse of the skill. It would be negative. Wasting the skill is zero. That's a step up, but it's still not good. So for these two reasons, I asked myself, what could an operating system developer do that would be positive, that would make the world a better place? And I realized that operating system development was exactly the skill that was needed to make the world a better place. The moral dilemma existed both for me and for all computer users because all the operating systems for modern computers were proprietary. By developing another operating system and then telling people this you are free to share, free to use in a community, we could create a way out of the moral dilemma for everyone. And I realized that this was probably the most important task that I would ever have a chance to try to do in my whole life. And I concluded that I had been elected by circumstances to do the job. It's as if you saw somebody drowning and you know how to swim and it's not Bush, then you have a moral duty to save the person. Well, I don't know how to swim, but I do know how to write software, and in this case, writing software was the work that was necessary. I was aware of this problem, and nobody else was paying attention to it. I had the skills necessary to try to solve the problem, and as far as I can see, nobody else would try to solve it if I did not. So I decided that I would develop a free software operating system or die trying, presumably of old age, because at the time, free software had no enemies. There was nobody actively trying to stop us from developing a free operating system. It was just a big job. So big that many people looked at it and said, yes, I wish it were done, but I won't try because it's such a big job. I decided to try anyway because this was the only way to live an upright life and have freedom. That decision led me to a bunch of other decisions, technical design decisions. What kind of system should it be? Well, I had just seen one free operating system turn into dust and blow away because it was written for one particular kind of computer, which became obsolete. I didn't want to write another system and have the same thing happen. So I figured this system that I was going to write had better be portable. It better be capable of running on many different kinds of computers, because I didn't know what kind of computer people would be using in 5 years or 10 years. There was just one successful portable operating system at the time, and that was Unix. In addition, Unix had some good ideas by the standards of the day. For instance, it had pipes and redirection of input and output and shell programming that was powerful and convenient, and the fork and exec system calls that were simple enough people really used them. So I decided to follow the design of Unix, figuring that way there was a pretty good chance I could succeed in making a system that would work portably. Further, I realized that users don't like incompatible changes. I could have picked the best ideas I had seen in the various systems I had worked on and added my own favorite ideas and designed my dream operating system. But then it would have been incompatible with everything. And I knew the users would say, this is very nice, but it's incompatible. We've already taught our users to use Unix. We've written our software for Unix. To switch to your system would just be too much work. So no thank you. At that point, I would have had a ready-made excuse. I could have said, I offered them freedom, they didn't take it, it's their fault. But I wanted to make more than just an excuse. I wanted to build a community that would actually have people living in it and enjoying the benefits of liberty. To do that, I had to write a system that people would actually use. Being compatible with some popular system would help this very much. So I decided to make the system compatible with Unix. Upward compatible, that is. The features that people were using on Unix would have to work the same way on this system. But we could add new features. We could add anything we wanted to. Any new ideas we had, we could add. But the old things would have to keep working. Now, Unix consists of many components that communicate through interfaces that were more or less documented. To be compatible with Unix, you have to replace each component one by one in a compatible way so that they still use the same interfaces. The users also use those interfaces. And that meant that the initial design decisions were already decided by that one decision to be compatible with Unix. And that was convenient. The only other decision necessary before I could start work was to choose a name. Now, we hackers, because we're working in the spirit of playful cleverness, we like to pick funny or even mischievous and naughty names for our programs. The thought of the users laughing at the name